strangely distant from the proceedings. The final drawing of the curtain was an emotional moment for Mum. I longed for the ordeal to be over, for her sake as much as mine. Yet a room was booked in the Legion, as was expected. There was more to endure before the day would be over. "So sorry for your loss, Mrs. Greenwood."
"Your dad was a wonderful man. He'll be a great loss, Anna."
The word loss was repeated in various phrases by strangers and acquaintances, a typically sanitized way to talk about death, as if Dad was simply lost in the supermarket and we might find him in the frozen food aisle.
"Ronald was such a lovely man,"
one well-wisher told me afterwards, when we were safely ensconced in a booth at the Legion.
"Do anything for anyone, would Ronald. He'll be greatly missed."
I nodded, smiling my thanks for his kind words, taking on the role of hostess for my mother, who was with us in body but not in spirit, and I invited him to partake of the buffet. I could hardly reply truthfully to the man, to tell him his opinion of my father was poles apart from my own, that I'd spent the last 10 years of my life trying to avoid Ronald Greenwood, and that my feelings for him at times bordered on hatred. Such mean-spirited thoughts were not like me, and totally inappropriate for the occasion. Berating myself, I determined to concentrate on Mum for the rest of the day. Her grief, unlike my own, was genuine. The afternoon dragged on until, eventually, we could leave with our duty done. Dad had been given the send-off he would have wanted and expected. Sleet accompanied us as we made our way home, falling gently into the silent dark streets, a fitting backdrop for our somber mood. Unlocking the front door, a palpable sense of emptiness drew us inside, but at least the house was warm, and I was grateful Mum had the forethought to turn up the central heating before we left. "Why don't you have a lie down?" I suggested. Mum's face revealed signs of tiredness, with dark patches below her eyes and lines around her mouth, which I'd never noticed before, dragging her lips downwards in a sad grimace. "Yes, Anna, I think I will." She forced a smile and trudged upstairs to her room, the room she'd shared with Dad for nearly 34 years. I shivered, despite the warmth. Being only 32, relatively independent, and with no intention of marrying, I could barely comprehend my mother's emotional state. Her earlier description was of a sense of being brutally and unexpectedly ripped in two, and functioning now as one half of a whole. Dad was away with the Royal Navy for long periods in the early days of their courtship and marriage, and I know Mum missed him terribly. Latterly, since I left home 10 years ago, it's been just the two of them, 24/7, and they were happy to be together. Mum now faced so many adjustments, and I wondered fleetingly if our relationship would change now Dad was gone. My emotions after we'd laid Dad to rest were somewhat ambiguous. I disliked the man intensely and couldn't grieve for his passing, but the strength of my animosity towards my own flesh and blood shamed and appalled me. It was a trait I abhorred, yet seemed unable to alter. I'd never considered myself a heartless person, but my reaction to Dad's death made me wonder, shouldn't I feel something other than this sense of relief? From the day I left home, Mum was always the connection, and one I had no desire to sever. Maintaining a relationship with her meant that Dad and I would occasionally cross paths. Okay, I must sound like a heartless bitch, but in my defense, I could argue that